Welcome to our safety orientation. Respiratory protection. OSHA requires that anyone who wears a respirator be fit tested prior to doing so and annually thereafter. Fit testing ensures that the user knows how to wear the respirator properly to create a good seal so that they aspirate only through the filter cartridges. We wear a respirator when we are performing spray application, no matter what type of paint we are using, when we are painting in small enclosed areas with little or no ventilation, high dust environments, lead abatement, and grinding concrete floors. It is extremely important to remember that a dust mask is not sufficient for protecting against vapors, mist, fumes, or high levels of dust. A respirator must be worn. Respirator rules. When not in use, respirators shall be kept in a dry, sealed, airtight container labeled with your name. Nothing can interfere with the seal of the facepiece, including facial hair. Clean the facepiece after each use with warm water and soap. Replace cartridges after they become soiled, after 40 hours of continuous use, or 30 days, whichever comes first. Job safety analysis and personal protective equipment. A job safety analysis, or JSA, is a pre-job meeting where you identify the tasks to be completed, the hazards associated with those tasks, the measures taken to protect against those hazards. Personal protective equipment is equipment worn to minimize exposure to a variety of hazards. What you should know about personal protective equipment. What PPE is necessary for each task, how to properly wear PPE, how to care for, clean, and maintain PPE. Also, it is extremely important to keep all PPE with you at all times. Housekeeping. Housekeeping tips. Maintain the build of waste such as paint, buckets, used brushes, rollers, used gloves, etc. on a daily basis. Keep equipment, unused paint, sundries, etc. stored in an organized manner, preferably out of the work area. Use drop cloths, cardboard for mixing stations, and to protect work area from paint drips. Clean out your trucks on a weekly basis. Remember, it is much easier to have a maintain approach than a once every few months approach. Hearing conservation. Many of the tasks we perform expose us to loud noises that will permanently damage our hearing. Noise-induced hearing loss is permanent, but 100% preventable. The louder the noise, the quicker it will damage your hearing. If you must raise your voice to be understood over background noise, that noise is hazardous. Here are some examples of environmental noise. Hearing protection is required at 85 decibels and louder. Just 15 minutes of exposure to 115 decibels can cause permanent damage to your hearing. Blood-borne pathogens. Blood-borne pathogens are microorganisms such as viruses or bacteria that are present in human blood and can cause disease in humans. Some examples of blood-borne pathogens is hepatitis C, which attacks the liver, cannot be prevented by vaccine. Hepatitis B, which attacks the liver, can be prevented by vaccine. And HIV, which attacks the immune system and cannot be prevented by vaccine. Blood-borne pathogens are transmitted when infectious blood or other potentially infectious material is introduced into the bloodstream via non-intact skin, such as cuts, scrapes, blisters, acne, etc., and contact with mucous membranes in the eyes, nose, mouth. Here are some common sense precautions. In the event of a serious injury, 911 should be the immediate response or follow plant protocol. Treat all human blood and bodily fluids as if they are infectious. If you want to administer help, protect yourself. Do not come into contact with someone else's blood or bodily fluid. Use PPE such as latex gloves. Fall protection. Here is a fact about fall protection. Falls are the leading cause of death in construction. A 4-foot fall can be serious or even fatal. Since 2011, fall protection has topped the list for leading OSHA violations. OSHA requires that fall protection be provided at elevations of 4 feet in general industry workplaces and 6 feet in the construction industry. At WW Enroughty & Son, we require 4 feet. Here are some examples of personal fall arrest systems. Personal fall arrest systems must be inspected before each use and must not be torn, frayed, excessively painted, discolored, and the ID label must be legible. Store your personal fall arrest system in a dry, clean environment away from direct sunlight. Do not leave it on any surface where it could come into contact with dirt, paint, solvent, or any contaminant that could degrade material. Here are some examples of anchor points we often use when working from heights. We have the beam strap, which is also known as a D-ring. We have the I-beam anchor, which is also known as a beamer. And we have the built-in permanent anchor point. Anchor points must be able to support 5,000 pounds of force. The force of the fall is transferred back to the anchor point, which can easily exceed thousands of pounds of force. Anchor points must be approved prior to use. Anchor points must be shoulder height or higher. Do not tie off to handrail, small diameter pipe, or sprinkler systems. Here is a fall distance diagram with calculations that show how critical it is that we have our safety harness and our lanyards and are 100% tied off when required. Aerial lifts. Always perform and document a pre-start inspection and function check before use each day. What to check? Fluid levels, leaks, wheels, tires, the battery, lower level controls, horn, gauges, lights and backup alarms, steering and brakes, operating and emergency controls, anchor point for personal fall arrest systems, guardrail system and gate, control play cards, warning, operational, instructional markings. Always inspect your entire workspace prior to operation. Be aware of overhead, electric, and ground hazards, clearances, and area personnel. Operation inspection from ground controls and from platform controls. It is critical to check that all functions are operating properly. Ensure that all functions stop when emergency stop is pressed and when enable switch is released. Operating hazards. Never operate a malfunctioning machine. Do not operate on a slope or uneven surface. Do not operate on a soft surface. Do not operate when wind conditions exceed 30 miles per hour, or if it's windy or gusty conditions. Do not operate within 10 foot of electrical power lines. Never add ladders, steps, or any items to stand on the basket for additional reach. Do not stand on tow board or handrails. Never exceed platform weight capacity. Avoid buildup of debris on basket floor. Operating tips. Inspect path of intended travel. Inspect overhead clearance. Keep non-operating personnel away from machine while in use. Always enter basket through gate or door and securely shut after entry. Maintain 100% tie-off while in basket. Do not use lift to transfer material or personnel onto another structure without prior approval from facility and WWE Safety Department. Do not drive the machine while elevated. Lower boom, drive to next location, then extend boom arm to desired location. All aerial lift operators must possess a current operator's card from WWE Safety. Scaffolding and ladders. Scaffolds are not to be used unless inspected and tagged by a competent person. Inspection must be performed daily and documented. A red tag means unsafe, do not use. A yellow tag means use with caution. Potential hazard should be listed on that yellow tag. A green tag means that it is safe and it is ready to use. If a scaffold does not have a full guardrail system, such as top rail, mid rail, or toe board, a personal fall arrest system must be used. Hard hats must be worn to protect from falling objects. Do not elevate your position while on a scaffold. An example of this, using a ladder or standing on the toe board, mid rail, or top rail. Work on or from scaffold is prohibited during storms or high winds. Ladder safety. Ladders shall be maintained free of oil, grease, and other slipping hazards. All manufacturers' labels must be legible. Ladders shall not be loaded beyond the maximum intended load. Ladders with structural defects, such as broken or missing rungs, broken or missing side rails, corroded components, or other faulty or defective components, shall be immediately marked in a manner that readily identifies them as a defective or tagged with "do not use" and shall be withdrawn from service. Portable extension ladders shall be used at a 4-to-1 ratio. This means that for every 4 feet of height between the base and where the ladder makes contact with the structure you're leaning against, the base needs to be 1 foot away, like this diagram. Ladders shall be used only on stable and level surfaces. Maintain 3 points of contact at all times. When ladders are used to access an upper landing surface, the ladder side rails shall extend at least 3 feet above the upper landing. Tie off ladders at the top whenever possible. Do not carry items up and down ladders. It is very important to use a bucket and a rope. Here are 2 examples of how to incorrectly use step ladders. Never stand on the top step and never stand on the second highest step. Lockout, tag out. The OSHA standard for lockout, tag out addresses the practices and procedures necessary to disable machinery or equipment, thereby preventing the release of hazardous energy while employees perform servicing and maintenance activities. The standard outlines measures for controlling hazardous energies, electrical, mechanical, hydraulic, pneumatic, chemical, thermal, and other energy sources. Equipment is locked out when performing work or maintenance on the equipment, a worker is in proximity of a hazard from equipment or machinery, types of energy that can be released, electrical, water, chemical or coolant, steam, pneumatic, natural gas, hydraulic, mechanical. Locking out requires that a device be placed on the equipment that physically prevents someone from energizing the equipment or an accidental release of energy. It must be substantial enough to prevent removal without the use of excessive force or unusual techniques. Locks shall be labeled with your name. Each person shall receive their own lock and key. Only the person who applied the lock may remove it. Permit required confined space. A confined space is defined as a space large enough for a worker to enter and perform work. A confined space is not designed for continuous occupancy, and a confined space has limited means of entry and exit. A confined space permit must be filled out prior to work commencing. Confined space entry procedure. Monitoring atmospheric conditions. The attendant must maintain continuous air monitoring. Results must be recorded every hour or 2 hours, depending on facility requirements. Test atmospheric conditions for oxygen, LEL, toxic gases or vapors, carbon monoxide, and hydrogen sulfide. Confined space team. Entry supervisor. Person in charge of entry operations. Authorized entrant. Persons entering the confined space to perform the work. Attendant or hole watch. Person placed at the entryway to the confined space to monitor work activities and conditions, etc. Entry supervisor, the person in charge of entry operations. The entry supervisor must know space hazards, verify emergency plans and specified entry conditions such as permits, tests, procedures, and equipment before allowing entry. Terminate entry and cancel permits when entry operations are completed or if a new condition exists. Verify that rescue services are available and that the means for summoning them are operable. Take appropriate measures to remove unauthorized entrance. Ensure that entry operations remain consistent with the entry permit and that acceptable entry conditions are maintained. Authorized entrant. The person entering the confined space to perform the work. The authorized entrant must know space hazards, the use of appropriate personal protective equipment, maintain communication with attendant, and must wear a full body harness. Attendant or hole watch. Attendant or hole watch must know the hazards and the behavioral effects of the hazards. Monitor atmospheric conditions. Check entrance in and out upon entry and exit. Communicate with entrance throughout the work period. Monitor and evacuate entrance if necessary. Summon rescue if needed. Warn away unauthorized persons. Remain at entryway until relieved. The attendant must not perform any other duties. Responding to emergencies. The attendant must be ready to evacuate all entrants if any unsafe or abnormal conditions arise. This includes, but is not limited to, changes in atmospheric conditions, noticing abnormal behavioral from an entrant, as well as emergency situations occurring outside of the confined space. The attendant must also be ready to initiate emergency rescue services. The attendant must therefore know beforehand the proper procedure for doing so, such as radio, telephone, plant phone number, etc. Fire prevention and fire extinguishers. No smoking within the vicinity of a fire hazard. No open flames. Fire extinguishers shall be placed near fueled equipment. Always use metal, properly labeled safety cans for storing fuel. No plastic cans. Always use a funnel when pouring fuel. Be mindful of hot work, such as grinding, and follow hot work procedures. Fire extinguisher inspection. Sign and date tag after positive inspection. Inspect monthly that the plastic seal is intact and holding the pin in place. The pin is in place and preventing accidental discharge. Good condition, no dents or rust on the extinguisher. The extinguisher gauge reads full in the green. The third-party inspection tag in place is less than 1 year old. If extinguisher fails inspection, take out of service immediately and replace. Fire extinguisher care. Store properly in your work vehicle. Keep secured to prevent rolling. Keep extinguisher canister free of paint, solvent, and other contaminants. Fire extinguisher use. Here is an acronym: pass, pull pin out, aim at the base of the fire, squeeze the handle, sweep the discharge from side to side across the base of the fire. Is the fire too big? Fire extinguishers are designed for putting out small fires. They are a one-time use. Please call 911 for an immediate emergency regarding a large fire. Hazard communication. Chemicals pose a wide range of health hazards such as irritation, sensitization, and carcinogenicity, and physical hazards such as flammability, corrosion, and reactivity. OSHA's hazard communication standard is designed to ensure that information about these hazards and associated protective measures is disseminated. This is accomplished through labeling of containers and safety data sheets. Here is an example of a pictogram with the hazards associated with the certain material being used. Safety data sheets must be readily available within 10 minutes according to OSHA. Lead abatement. Lead in construction. Lead is poisonous to our bodies. Lead can damage the central nervous system, cardiovascular system, reproductive system, hematological systems, and kidneys. When absorbed into the body in high enough doses, lead can be toxic. In addition, workers' lead exposure can harm their children's development. Short-term acute overexposure as short as days can cause conditions affecting the brain that develops quickly into seizures, coma, and death from cardiorespiratory arrest. Short-term occupational exposures of this type are highly unusual, but not impossible. Extended, long-term, chronic overexposure can result in severe damage to the central nervous system, particularly the brain. It can also damage the blood-forming, urinary, and reproductive systems. Symptoms of chronic overexposure: loss of appetite, constipation, nausea, excessive tiredness, headache, fine tremors, metallic taste in the mouth, weakness, nervous irritability, anxiety, insomnia, dizziness. And just remember, lead is toxic to both male and female reproductive systems. Worker exposure. Lead is most commonly absorbed into the body by inhalation. When workers breathe in lead as a dust, fume, or mist, their lungs and upper respiratory tract absorb it into the body. They can also absorb lead through the digestive system if it enters the mouth and is ingested. A significant portion of the lead inhaled or ingested gets into the bloodstream. Once in the bloodstream, lead circulates through the body and is stored in various organs and body tissues. Some of this lead is filtered out of the body quickly and excreted, but some remains in the blood and tissues. As exposure continues, the amount stored will increase if the body absorbs more lead than it excretes. The lead stored in the tissue can slowly cause irreversible damage, first to individual cells, then to organs and whole body systems. Risk of exposure. Workers at the highest risk of lead exposure are those involved in abrasive blasting. Other operations with the potential to expose workers to lead include power tool cleaning without dust collection systems, cleanup activities where dry expendable abrasives are used, movement and removal of abrasive blasting enclosures, manual, dry scraping, and sanding. Worker protection and protection measures. Hazard determination, including exposure assessment, medical surveillance, and provisions for medical removal. Job-specific compliance programs. Engineering and work practice controls, respiratory protection, protective clothing and equipment, housekeeping, hygiene facilities and practices, signs, employee information and training, and record keeping, biological monitoring. Employees will be sent for a lead blood test prior to starting a lead abatement job, as well as after the job is completed. The employer must notify each employee in writing of employee exposure assessment results within 5 working days of receiving them. Hand and power tools. Hand tools must be inspected before each use. No broken or cracked handles. Only use a tool for its intended use. Never carry a tool by the cord or hose. Keep cords and hoses away from heat, oil, and sharp edges. Disconnect tools when not using them, before servicing and cleaning them, and when changing accessories such as blades, bits, and cutters. Remove all damaged portable electric tools from use and tag them "Do not use." Do not wear loose clothing or gloves when using rotating equipment. Power tools, such as grinders. Do not remove guards or handles from grinders. Do not clamp or tie a switch in any way. Use both hands. Safety glasses and face shield are required when using a hand grinder. Abrasive blasting safety. Abrasive blasting safety. To ensure abrasive blasting safety is being performed correctly, we must have our setup, our breather box, our pot man, and all blasting safety protocols in check. Here is an example of an abrasive blasting setup. Hoses, couplings, and coupling gaskets should be inspected during setup. These components are highly prone to deterioration. Check hoses for interior deterioration. Check couplings for pinholes and interior deterioration. Check gaskets to ensure sufficient thickness. Hose connections. All blast hose and Chicago hose connections must be equipped with a whip check and locking safety clips. Whip checks must be fully extended on blast hose. Colonial pipeline requires that whip checks be duct taped. When running hoses, blast hoses must be kept as short and as straight as possible. Turns and curves should be minimized to reduce unnecessary wear. Abrasive blasting safety required personal protective equipment. Blast hood with grade D breathing air. Blast suit or coveralls. No exposed skin. Leather gloves. Safety toe boots. Earplugs. Abrasive blasting safety breather box. The breather box monitors for carbon monoxide. It does not filter carbon monoxide. The breather box filters breathing air. The breather box has a 3-stage filter system: bulk water and particulates, auto drain, atomized oils, mists, ultrafine particulates, auto drain, organic vapors and odors, manually drain. Breather box setup: power supply, 2 9-volt batteries or plugged in using an extension cord. Air pressure set to between 80 and 100 psi. Air monitor flow rate, minimum airflow. Breather box is designed to be used in the upright position. If it is not, it will not filter properly. Calibration: the breather box must be calibrated within the last month. Breather box care: keep breather box out of rain. Do not throw breather boxes into trucks. Replace breather box dust caps. Return breather box to WWE safety after job completion. Abrasive blasting safety pot worker: keep hands and eyes clear of plunger. Keep clear of pot to hose connection. Be ready to shut down system in case of an emergency. Abrasive blasting safety continued. Deadman controls are designed to automatically power down if the user lets go. There is to be no clamping while abrasive blasting by any WWE employee. Keep hands and body clear of nozzle while blasting. Wait for complete depressurization when finished before setting hose down. Electrical safety awareness. Extension cords. Visually inspect before each use. Use only 12 gauge or larger extension cords. All cords must be 3-pronged. Any damaged cords must be discarded or removed from job site. Keep electrical cords out of water and puddles. Always use GFCIs. A GFCI measures the amount of current exiting and entering a receptacle. If it detects any difference, it immediately trips and stops power flowing from the receptacle. Test and reset before each use. Powered industrial trucks. Here are some examples of powered industrial trucks we see and use on job sites. Got the Class 5 warehouse, the Class 7 lull or telehandler, and the Class 7 rough terrain. All forklifts must be inspected prior to use each day. Seat belts must be worn at all times. Carry loads between 4 inches and 6 inches off the ground. Tilt a load back just enough to stabilize it. Slow down and sound horn at corners. Lower forks to the ground when finished using. Spill prevention and response. All substances should be stored in proper closed containers to minimize the potential for a spill. Containers should be stored in an upright, orderly way. Any spills must be immediately reported. Here are some WWE requirements. Uniform and appearance. Enroughty attire, no other labels. High-vis vest, safety glasses, safety toe boots, and hard hat. Clothes must be clean. Always have proper PPE in your bag ready for use at any job site. No wandering around work sites. Stay in your designated area. Smoking only allowed in designated areas. No other form of tobacco use is allowed. No open wounds, sores, or cuts. And maintain waste buildup.